Welcome to Defining Dad Bod, where we work to untangle the messy knots of the health and fitness industry as if your children's lives depended on it. Because they do. This is where we decide to make our bodies stand for something bigger than ourselves. This is where we find practical wisdom to live by, one powerful conversation at a time. May the words spoken here inspire you to keep moving forward no matter where you are. Who knows who you could be if you could become 1% better every single day.
We can do the show thanks to the support of listeners just like you. For more information how you can become part of the inner circle, go to findingdadbod.com/inner circle.
What's up, guys? This is Alex Van Houten with Defining Dad Bod. I hope you're doing super well. Welcome to episode 144, where we're going to talk about emotional eating. I'm actually very excited about this episode because it came to me in an epiphany on a run. I had planned an entirely different episode. I had the outline written out on the whiteboard just fine, and then I got back from my run to record and I erased the whole thing, and what you're about to hear is what came out. But before we get there, I have one very important piece of housekeeping to get through, and that is, holy crap, I am so sorry. Last week, I accidentally published the unedited version of the protein part of the TrueFit series, and it was painful. I hope you didn't listen to the whole thing, because it's a lot of me pausing to collect my thoughts and then rewording the sentence that I just said, which is actually how I record most of my podcasts. Very similar to writing an essay, only in real time speaking. And thanks to our awesome sound editor, who does a fantastic job editing the podcast itself, almost every single one of the podcasts I've published so far comes out smelling like roses and intellectually coherent. But last week's was not so, and I found out at 7 a.m. when one of my clients shot me a text and said, "Not sure what's wrong with this podcast, but I'm pretty sure that you don't want it out in the world." And since then, I've received a few more emails, so I wanted to address it here. One, I'm sorry. That's 100% on me. My editor had actually done a great job with the file and sent it to me. I just selected the wrong one to upload. Two, it's fixed. The problem is, some podcast applications automatically download the file once it's uploaded, and they don't update the file if I change it. So, if you still have the crappy version of last week's protein episode, go to your podcast application and tell it to delete the episode. Then you can re-download the perfected version. Or, alternatively, you can listen to it online through your web browser at definingdadbod.com/blog/143. Lastly, I'll take this opportunity to share a little story with you so you get a snapshot of what it's like to live in the Van Houten household right now. I remember the exact moment that I selected the wrong file. Bennett, our 1-year-old, is cutting 4 molars at once right now, and he's not a really roll with the punches kind of kid, so every day our household sounds like crying and gnashing of teeth, quite literally. Our only reprieve is during nap time, which, when you're cutting 4 molars, doesn't come easy. So the only way we can get Bennett to nap right now is for me to sit in his room, in the rocking chair in the corner, in the dark, and do my work while he's supposed to be sleeping. He'll lay there and squirm and grunt and cry out every once in a while, and I'll be working in the corner on my laptop as quietly as possible, every once in a while saying, "No, go to sleep, lay down." It's not fun, but you do what you gotta do. Anyway, I'd been in there for 30 minutes, coaching clients and answering questions on social media, when I received an email that the file I needed was ready to upload. Excellent, I thought. Getting this uploaded was part of my to-do list today, and now I can knock it out. Just as I was downloading the file and opening the folder that I needed to open in order to select it and put it online, a message flashed across the top of my laptop. My battery was 3 minutes from dying, which in real life means my battery was 30 seconds from dying. And so somehow, I had to get out of the dark room where my 1-year-old was sleeping without making a peep and get to my office where my laptop charger was in the next 30 seconds. I got up, the chair creaked, I started to tiptoe across the floor, my knee popped, and then the worst happened. I stepped on the loudest damn toy that kid has, and I knew the jig was up. He started crying, my laptop was still dying, and for a brief moment that was the end of my happy day. So I jogged to the office, plugged the laptop in, and selected the file to upload while I went back to Bennett's room to see if I could get him back to sleep. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how you ended up with a 48-minute, very strange, unedited podcast. And I hope you'll download the real one and give it a shot. #TrueStory. #DadLife. Thanks for listening. I hope you can relate. Now, let's get to 4 things you need to know about emotional eating and your fitness goals. Chances are, you probably know what emotional eating is. But when I talk to clients about emotional eating, it turns out they don't understand it very well in their own lives. And so today, I hope to point out 4 things that you should know about emotional eating that might help you get a better handle on what it means in your life and how you might better manage your emotions in a way that isn't detrimental to your health and fitness. So the first thing you need to know about emotional eating is that we've been doing it our whole lives. Many times when a client talks to me about emotional eating, they make it sound like something that's developed in adulthood. I've had a bad day, and so I want to grab the ice cream. Or I need a pick-me-up, and so I stop at Starbucks to get my latte. And in their mind, these are habits that were created in adulthood. And while yes, it's true, we reinforce and manifest those things differently in adulthood, the truth is, every single person I've ever met started as a baby. And I don't know how much time you've spent around babies, but here at Defining Dad Bod, most of our listeners are parents. And I'm about to say something that every parent knows. Babies cry. In fact, some studies show that the first year of a baby's life consists of about 9 hours a day, on average, of crying. That's really unfortunate to those of us who really don't like babies crying. In fact, I don't know anybody who doesn't like babies crying. It's the biological equivalent of nails on a chalkboard for most people that I know. But what the heck does babies crying have to do with emotional eating? Well, think about it. Crying is the only way a baby can tell you that they need something. And what do babies need? They need you to change their poopy diaper. They need you to help them get to sleep, or they need you to feed them. And thus begins emotional eating. Babies, even infants up to age 1, can be angry, sad, hungry, tired, uncomfortable, or even bored. And they'll cry to tell us these things, and we as parents do our best to give the baby what they need. And as a dad with 2 young boys, it's been fun to see how my trial and error process with those 2 has found different solutions to the crying problem. My oldest, Gabriel, had this thing since he was about 3 months old that he'd get really worked up, and the only thing that seemed to calm him down and entertain him was to be put over Dad's head on one arm and walked around the area. Don't ask me how I got there. I'm not even sure how the trial and error process led us to that, but it worked. And when something works on a crying baby, you don't ask stupid questions, you just do it. Which, by the way, was a lot of fun in places like Hobby Lobby, where every mom, grandma, and auntie in the area who saw me lifting my 4-month-old child over my head on one arm and walking him around the store were visibly shaken from the sight. Don't worry, ladies. I never dropped him. #dadlife. My youngest, on the other hand, didn't really take to that as well. Instead, he wanted to be put on Dad's shoulders. In fact, if you've been following the show for a while, about 6 months ago, I had significant lower back issues resulting from carrying around my 6-month-old on my shoulders for hours and hours a day while trying to go about my daily business. I think that little punk was going for a world record in hours cried in a day at the time, and the only peace we could have in our house was if I was willing to walk around with him on my shoulders. Well, why am I telling you this? Well, again, if you spent any time around babies, you know that there are other coping mechanisms to help them stop crying. But even through young childhood, the fastest and most effective way as a parent to help babies and children cope with negative emotions is to feed them something. And what that means for you is no matter who you are, what your fitness goals are, or even how old you are, you have been emotionally eating for a number of years, and it didn't start in adulthood. The reason I'm telling you this is because if you're trying to overcome emotional eating because you're struggling with it right now, it's important for you to understand that this is not new to you. This is something you've been doing since before you can remember. And back then, it wasn't a bad thing. One of the few ways that your parents or you could really manage strong negative emotions was making sure that you got something to eat. However, understanding that now means that you can begin to see your opportunities to cope with negative emotions differently. I hope that we've also opened up the possibility for you to see that you've grown a lot since being a child. And while food is still a very effective way of handling both positive and negative emotions, the fact that you have much better developed frontal lobes now means that you have the brain capacity to develop habits and processes that will not only manage your emotions well, but perhaps even invest in your own personal health and fitness better. So, number 1, if you're struggling with emotional eating, don't feel bad. You didn't create this problem in adulthood. This has been around since you were a child. But understanding that also brings good news. you're not a child anymore. And so we might be able to develop better ways, better processes and habits that will not only help us to manage and experience our emotions, but also could make them a crucial part of investing in our own personal health and fitness. Which brings me to number 2 of the 4 things you need to know about emotional eating, and that is, just because someone's fit doesn't mean they don't emotionally eat. You're not going to hear points 3 and 4 very well until you hear point 2 from me, which is, I, Alex Van Houten, proud owner of a 6-pack, split biceps, and 90-pound Turkish get-up ability, while managing Ehlers-Danlos, might I add, has struggled and continues to wrestle with emotional eating. I'm telling you this because I don't want you to think I'm sitting in some high ivory tower of health and fitness, telling you, lowly people who wrestle with emotional eating, that you need to figure it out, or similarly, that emotional eating's just fine if it would, quote, fit your macros. This is something that I hear far too often in the fitness industry, and it drives me bananas. Fit personal trainers and Instagram models giving everybody emotional eating advice, or calorie counting advice about their nutrition and their diet plan, or even espousing things like cheat days, without admitting a very simple biological fact. Everybody has emotionally eaten. However, not everybody has the biology or the conditioning for that emotional eating not to end up on their love handles. I'll say it a different way. There are many trainers I know who are very athletic and who have been genetically gifted with athleticism, who try to advise their clients on emotional eating while struggling behind the scenes themselves. And the only reason they're not chubby despite their emotional eating is because biologically they've been dealt a pretty positive hand of cards. This is especially apparent if you ask a room full of very young trainers, ages 18 to 24, why do they work out so much? Some of them might say it's great stress relief, and others might say, I just love doing it. But if you ask a room full of trainers, who in here ultimately works out so they can eat whatever they want? Every hand in the room goes up. And I know this is true because I've performed this experiment on over 1,000 trainers who came through my training when I worked at Lifetime Fitness. The sad truth is that for some people, working out really does allow them to eat whatever they want. And so they don't have to manage the whole emotional eating thing. I mean, really, if you could have a couple beers several times a week, eat an entire pizza, and have cake for breakfast, and still wake up with great abs, would you address the fact that you drown your sorrows in Ben & Jerry's just like everybody else? Probably not. The unfortunate truth is this. Pain and suffering is usually required to make us conscious of a problem. And most of the clients who come to me talking about their emotional eating issues are also the clients who have had to painfully stare in the mirror at themselves as they're way more overweight than they'd like to be. Or similarly, have spent many years working to exercise themselves out of their poor nutrition habits while watching their pants, their dress sizes, and even their shirts get bigger and bigger. The pain and suffering of getting more obese and contracting more medical issues because of it, while being low energy and stressed about not being able to do anything about it, is what tends to make my clients conscious of the emotional eating they're engaging in. And personally for me, my pain and suffering is usually digestive. Whether it's a blessing or a curse, the lack of collagen in my digestive system because of Ehlers-Danlos tends to bring a different sort of pain and suffering if I emotionally eat the things that don't really sit well in my stomach. This topic of conversation is definitely something I would love to have an expert come on and I can interview them about. But before I can get to points 3 and 4 of what you need to know about emotional eating, it's so important that you hear this. Just because someone is fit does not mean they don't emotionally eat. Which then brings me to point number 3. It's possible that you could benefit from learning more about your emotions. It was recently found that the average American adult faithfully identifies 3 emotions: anger, happiness, and sadness. And while those are definitely 3 very potent and important emotions, they are definitely not the only ones. In fact, scientists who research emotions for a living have identified over 80 different emotions that the human body and mind is capable of experiencing. I won't read all 80 of these emotions here. That would either create such intense boredom or such intense anxiety that perhaps you'd be driven to emotionally eat. Womp womp. So I've included a link to the image that would help you to visualize this in the show notes below. But I will give you an example here. Imagine that the emotion anger could be subdivided into 7 different categories. Are you let down, or humiliated, or bitter, or mad, or aggressive, or frustrated, or distant? And each of those emotions can be subdivided into further granular categories. For instance, under anger, I could be mad. And the 2 types of mad are furious or jealous. Or on the flip side, I could be frustrated. And under frustrated, annoyed. Now, why am I telling you this? Well, in point number 4, I'm going to talk about different ways that we can manage our emotions that can be positive and beneficial toward our health and fitness, rather than emotionally eating things that might be bad for us. However, which strategy you work toward building in yourself has a lot to do with what emotion you're actually dealing with. So let's say I emotionally eat when I'm angry. It's important to understand which aspect of anger usually drives me to eat, and then understanding which aspect of anger does so might help me understand what strategy is best to help me cope with my anger eating. Personally, I feel angry almost daily. Why? I have a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old, and if I'm trying to accomplish something, like speak to my wife about something important, and I'm being continually interrupted by a curious 4-year-old or a crying 1-year-old, I tend to find myself on the annoyed or infuriated scale. Now that's different from being betrayed or resentful or indignant. And so let's say by understanding my anger emotion a little more deeply, I can admit that I'm annoyed and infuriated, that I can't have a great conversation with my wife with my kids around, at least not at this stage of life. Then I can work to create a strategy that helps me deal with being annoyed or infuriated. And as I'll talk about in a second, many of my emotions are well managed and experienced through exercise. Thanks to endorphins, I'm much less likely to be annoyed or infuriated when interrupted regularly by my 4 and 1-year-old. And similarly, if I've spent the entire day being interrupted by my 1 and 4-year-old, I tend to deadlift a little bit heavier and run a little bit faster. And so the truth is this: if you're wrestling with emotional eating, it's important to have a very good understanding of the exact emotions that are driving that habit for you. And most people either haven't been taught or haven't taken the time and energy to learn that they're capable of a myriad of emotions, not just angry, sad, or happy. And it's not just you. The last thing I'll say about this point is my eyes weren't open to this fact until a collegiate level class in the science of emotions. We learned fun things like the physiological response to anger and fear being very similar, or the genetic proclivity to experience disgust. Fun fact, did you know that half the population, if asked to spit in a cup, wouldn't be able to drink their own saliva? Try it at home. Can you do it? Spit in a cup. See if you can make yourself drink it. Similarly, ask your spouse to try, and see which one of you is more disgust sensitive. Come on, if your cups are clean at home, it came from you, so it can't really hurt you going back in, right? Good luck with that little rabbit trail. The point is, if you want to get really good at managing emotional eating issues well in your life, then it's going to be very important, either through self-reflection or connection with somebody who knows what they're talking about, to understand what emotions drive eating for you, and then understanding it better, and understanding the things that bring on those emotions well, will help you begin to devise a better strategy. And while this can be an arduous, even sometimes painful process, you'll be so happy you did the work. And more specifically, you'll be more inspired, hopeful, thankful, confident, and even joyful. Again, if you want to know where I'm getting these words from, and you want to begin to understand the different aspects of your emotions better, check out the link in the show notes. The last thing I want you to know about emotional eating is the practical side of things. You can develop powerful ways to identify, express, accept, and experience emotions in a way that's constructive and good for your health and fitness. Similar to our previous points, it's very possible that this needs to be its own show altogether. But I'd be remiss if I talked about emotional eating and I didn't give you some alternatives to managing your emotions well, other than eating. So I wrote down 6 that have been powerful and important to me in my life, and that I've used regularly with clients to help them address and overcome their emotional eating struggles. These 6 are in no particular order, and I listed some pros and cons for each of them, so you may understand some of the challenges to adopting this way of handling different emotions. So, first on my list of coping processes and habits for your emotional eating, you guessed it, exercise. The pros of exercise are almost too numerous to state here. In fact, a very large portion of the over 90 hours of content that I've published on Defining Dad Bod has been singing the praises of exercise this entire time. So I won't go crazy here. What I wrote off the top of my head for the benefits of regulating and experiencing emotions through exercise is 1, an instant lift in the chemistry of your brain and body. Again, I've gone through the science elsewhere. If you need me to explain it to you or point you in the direction of those resources on the show, find me in the Defining Dad Bod Inner Circle or shoot me a message at coachal@definingdadbod.com. The second pro of exercise is actual biological health. Exercise can be a good stress on the body that can help you adapt positively. And so it's very possible that by using exercise to experience and regulate a negative emotion, you can create a positive benefit to your biological body. For me, this has been true since I was 9 years old. Frustrated, depressed, confused, fearful, anxious. These are just a few of the emotions that I've positively managed by going for a run, lifting weights, going to a martial arts class, practicing an exercise skill, or playing an intense game like Ultimate Frisbee or DDR. Exercise is an amazing tool. And while I threw a lot of fitness people under the bus earlier, saying that just because somebody's fit doesn't mean they don't emotionally eat, one of the things that I have found is that most fitness people emotionally exercise. And we could have an argument as to whether or not that could be a bad thing if you take it too far. But when I talk to people who are struggling with emotional eating, and I ask them if they prefer to emotionally eat or trade exercise for eating, they would almost always pick exercise. Not because it might feel better than drinking wine because you're sad, or eating carrot cake because you're angry, but because they know exercise is better for them than just about anything they could put in their body. It reminds me of something Barney Stinson said in an episode of How I Met Your Mother. I didn't really watch a lot of that show, but I do remember a quote. He said, "When I feel sad, I stop feeling sad and feel awesome instead." And while that's funny, because you can't really do that, exercise is one of the ways you can actually make that happen. Insert, "When I feel sad, I exercise and then start feeling awesome instead." That's really a true thing. Now, exercise is not without its cons. The primary con of exercise, especially if you're using exercise to experience and even regulate your emotional status, is that exercise takes a large amount of time to develop proper skills. If you've never done a push-up before, or you have trouble with pull-ups, or running hurts your knees, it will take you many hours to begin mastering the progress of exercise. And for many people, that's a huge barrier to entry. If I'm sad, I can eat carrot cake immediately, and it doesn't take much skill to dip in there with the fork and pop it to my mouth. Similarly, feeling down and dragged out makes it really easy to pour a cup of coffee and drink that instead. Exercise, on the other hand, requires that I've practiced a certain set of skills enough so that that's even an option for me to choose, instead of emotional eating. And I admit, that's a huge barrier to entry. In fact, it's one of my biggest sources of job security as a personal trainer and coach of exercise. I don't recommend it lightly. It's a tough process to integrate exercise into your life and to get good enough at it that it can be a viable alternative to eating to regulate and experience your emotions. And even for those of us who are very skilled at exercise, sometimes motivation is a very limiting factor in using exercise to regulate and experience emotions. Do you think I feel like running every time I go for a run? And do you think sometimes I skip exercise altogether because I just don't feel like it today? Yes and yes. Since exercise takes effort and time, that's definitely a con that I've listed. But for the clients who've been faithful and committed to progressing themselves through exercise, and who spend time understanding and developing the skills for exercise, they would tell you that it has been an invaluable process and an invaluable tool to help them regulate and experience emotions well. Where once before, they only had food to turn to, now they have much more positive and beneficial habits as tools in their tool belt to enhance their life and to make themselves more healthy in light of negative emotions. Whatever your skill level, I believe exercise can be powerful for you. And if you need help getting started, consider our help at definingdadbod.com/shop/jumpstart. We'll get you moving in the right direction and help you identify what the path looks like for you to get better results out of your exercise discipline. Again, that's definingdadbod.com/shop/jumpstart. All right, as promised, I'm not going to gush a whole bunch on exercise. You've probably heard a lot from me already on that, and if you haven't, reach out. I'll help you connect to those resources. The next item on my list is journaling. As someone who is self-admittedly emotionally unaware, journaling has been a powerful part of helping me develop an honesty and an awareness around my emotional life. The fatherhood trope is, pick yourself up, stop crying about your problem, rub some dirt on it, walk it off, and move on. And while there's definitely a time and a place for that, trust me, I just finished teaching my 4-year-old how to ride his bike without training wheels. Wrestling with emotional eating is not one of those times, and journaling can help. The pros, it's free, it's a low energy thing, and journaling, if you care, can keep a record of emotions you've experienced in your life. Personally, it's been very interesting to me to journal through occurrences like being fired from work, or getting a promotion, or being sleep deprived in early childhood for my boys, or wrestling with a difficult decision in life. And to be able to go back and read those thoughts and understand where I was coming from, as well as how far I've come. I don't know if that sounds interesting to you or not, but it's been valuable to me. The cons of journaling is that it can be time-consuming, depending on how you do it. And kind of like exercise, it can take so many forms and requires practice to get good at it. I've heard many clients say, "Oh, I've tried to journal and I do it for a few days and then I stop." But that's not how exercise develops, and that's definitely not how journaling develops either. There are a lot of resources in the world to help you develop a journaling practice. Some people like to use gratitude. Some people journal their dreams. Some people do a free-form flow of writing. For me, I have 4 Word documents saved on my computer. One's called Self, 2 are named after my boys, and the 4th is titled Kristen, my wife. You can obviously do whatever you want with your journal, but I'm sharing my practice with you in case it's helpful and generates some ideas for you. My Self journal are my honest thoughts. They'll likely never see the light of day, and I generally add to that weekly, every Sunday morning. My running letter to my wife is something I give her every year on our anniversary. I print whatever I've written over the year, and I hand it to her as a way of saying, "These are all the ways I felt about you this year. I want you to read them, and maybe we can reminisce on some of the memories and talk about having an even better year next year." And then my Word document to my boys, I'm not really sure what I'm doing with that. I know I want to give it to them someday, maybe when they find out they're having their first child. But in each of their documents, I've written down memories, struggles, triumphs, and a lot of honest stuff that I just didn't find in any of the parenting books that I read when I was preparing for my first boy. Whatever you decide to do with your journaling practice, journaling can be a powerful way to handle, manage, and experience your emotions rather than eating because of them. The third item on my list is music. I have never met a person in my entire life who didn't like music. And it's hard to argue that music doesn't have a powerful effect on our biology and our mind. In fact, during my senior year of high school, my lab partner and I had to design an original experiment and then to test our hypothesis. We used my lab partner's pet rabbit to see what would happen to the heart rate of the rabbit when exposed to different types of music. We played country, we played classical, we had a silent room as a control, we played rock, and I'm a little bit of an electronica geek, so we did some trance as well. It was kind of a goofy experiment, and since my lab partner was my girlfriend at the time, it was a great excuse to spend a little bit extra time at her house with her pet rabbit. Why am I telling you this? Well, it's not a collegiate peer-reviewed study, but what we did find is that even rabbits respond differently to different types of music. Classical music actually found the rabbit's heartbeat to be slower than even a silent room, while rock music and electronica boosted the rabbit's heart rate significantly, even though the volume was the same as the other music that we'd played before. And while research on music is sparing at best, we do know that music can be a very powerful part of regulating and experiencing emotions. The pros of music is that in this day and age, it's widely and almost freely available just about anywhere. Additionally, it requires little to no energy at all to experience music. You just let it do its thing, and you do your thing. The cons of music is sometimes, in order to have a breakthrough in your emotions, you need new music. If you've been feeling a certain way for a long time, and you've been listening to the same sorts of music for a long time, then it might be time to spend some time and energy looking for other music. It takes time to find the right mix. And another con of music is that it's very easy to use music as a self-medication rather than experiencing the emotions themselves. And man, I get it. Some emotions suck so bad you don't want to experience them at all, and I won't begrudge you some self-medicating music. But I encourage you to use music more intelligently than just to medicate the way you feel in a certain moment. I have a cousin I know, I'm not going to name any names, and I have quite a few cousins, so anonymity is upheld here. But that cousin would tell you that when they're feeling sad, they just play some happy music and they feel better. And while I'm not going to lie, again, that's pretty effective and handles crummy emotions pretty well. Sometimes you need to feel sad or angry in order to make a positive change. And I think it's both powerful and beneficial to use music to boost you in that direction rather than changing the emotion itself. It's a deep idea, but those are my quick and honest thoughts about it. Number 4 is nature. Whether it's the mountains, the woods, the beach, or just a walking trail behind your house with the sun overhead and birds chirping in the trees, nature is a very powerful force to help you both experience and regulate your emotions. And I find it's actually most potent when combined with exercise and music. Oftentimes, if I've had a long, hard week, I like to go for a hike or a trail run in the early morning with great music in my headphones. And I get to combine the benefits of nature, music, and exercise all together. And for me personally, that experience is illuminating, inspiring, and even fulfilling in a way that I look forward to, make time for, and work hard to practice regularly. I know that makes me a little weird. My wife even jokes with me about it. As young parents, we trade each other for, quote, me time to help each other recharge from the daily demands of nurturing, playing with, and sometimes just dealing with a 4 and a 1-year-old. She gets a few hours and then trades me for a few hours as well, and that's been very helpful for us. But she likes to give me a hard time because she says I'm the only person she knows that when given 4 hours to do whatever I want, I'll wake up early, strap a camelback on, and go wear myself out in the mountains for fun. But hey man, whatever works. The pros of nature is that it's all around you, which is also a con of nature, and that if you live in an urban area, or even a rural one, sometimes it can be hard to access. Personally, I've found that no matter where I live, I can find at least 1 to 3 places within a 5 to 10 minute walk, jog, ride, bike, whatever, that'll put you where you need to be. I've lived in urban areas where nature was just a bench in a park. And I'm not going to lie, a jog downtown Dallas feels a lot like being surrounded by mountains. If you don't want to deal with traffic, do it on a Sunday morning. But I've also lived places where even though nature was all around me, trying to run on a highway shoulder was a good way to die. But if you'll take a little time and energy, and you'll find your few places where you can go experience nature in a way that's good for you, I promise you won't be sorry you found them. Speaking of things that are hard to find, the 5th strategy you can use is a conversation with a good friend. If you spent the time and energy at this point in your life to have developed relationships with people who want the best for you, then an amazing way to handle your emotions well rather than eating is to talk it out with those people. Now, I don't know if you've gathered or not, but I'm not a real talk about your feelings kind of guy. It's a skill I'm currently developing because I'd really like my boys to have it, and I found it to be an important part of a healthy marriage. However, my first experiences with conversations being a powerful way to regulate and manage emotions actually came through my personal training practice. You know how I said that exercise could be a great way to handle emotions well? Imagine exercising when you could say whatever it is you wanted to somebody who is a captive listener for a whole hour. Well, that's a personal trainer. In fact, ask any personal trainer or hairstylist or massage therapist or even a nail salon tech, and they'll tell you that oftentimes they feel like a therapist. Why do they feel like a therapist? Well, they're constantly listening to the problems and emotions of other people. And if they're really good at their job, outside of sympathizing every once in a while, they just shut up, do their job, and listen well. The truth is, there's a lot of psychology to why talking things out helps to align our emotions along with our intentions and our integrity. And while I'm not qualified to talk you through those mechanisms, I can tell you that they're important and powerful. In fact, I believe that social connection of this nature, true, authentic, honest conversation with people who really care about your best, is just as powerful, if not more so, than exercise, nature, journaling, or music. If it's so powerful, and it's free, then why isn't everybody doing it all the time? Well, you know as well as I do that great relationship connections are very hard to find. And if you experience negative emotions regularly, then you know that nobody wants to be friends with somebody who's constantly dumping their depression and anxiety on them. What am I saying? I'm saying 1, good friends are hard to find. And 2, you have to have other mechanisms of handling your emotions than just dumping them on other people. Because if all you do is dump your negative emotions on other people, you won't have good friends for long. In fact, the whole dumping thing is probably one of the reasons that I as a trainer became such a good listener. I mean, you're paying me for that hour, I don't mind listening, and at the same time, if you get too annoying, I could just make you do burpees. That'll help you burn off your frustration and shut you up at the same time. I wish I could say that was all a joke, but 20-year-old Alex didn't have a whole lot of patience for your feelings. Joking aside though, this is extremely important. In fact, in conversations that I've had with clients, sometimes emotional eating is driven by conflicts that could be solved with a conversation. Yes, it would be painful. Yes, it would probably be difficult. But are you really eating Ben & Jerry's because you're anxious? Or do you need to pick up the phone and talk through this issue with your family? Or do you just need to have that hard conversation with your spouse? I know, I said conversations were probably the most powerful thing on this list. However, it's the only thing on this list that involves relationships, and relationships can be complicated. So it doesn't come without its costs. The last thing on my list gets a little bit into the spiritual realm, and that is meditation and prayer. Whatever your spiritual predilections are, meditation and prayer have been shown through research to be powerful ways to manage, regulate, become aware of, and get a handle on your emotions. At the very least, meditation of 3 minutes, that is, focusing your mind on one thing rather than letting it jump from thing to thing, activates your frontal lobes and deactivates your amygdala, which means that you put a little more blood flow and power to the part of your brain that can manage emotions, and you take a little bit of blood flow and power away from the part of your brain that fuels emotions. If you want to experience this, take a deep breath. Breathing in for a 10 count and out for a 10 count is a small dose of what meditation and prayer actually does to the body. See? Feel better already, don't you? I've talked about this a number of places in the show, and as unqualified as I am to talk about therapeutic conversations, I'm probably even more unqualified to talk about meditation and prayer as an expert. The pros of meditation and prayer is that it's free, it's personal, and there are immediate brain-boosting effects like exercise. The cons, like several of the things on this list, is that meditation and prayer is a category of skill you can develop. The good news is, just like journaling, exercise, and even getting out in nature, is that you don't have to be a Tibetan monk who can meditate for 6 hours at a time to experience benefits. Even 3 minutes on a breath training app like Headspace can help you begin to experience the positive regulatory benefits on your emotional well-being. Don't knock it till you try it. And there you have it. 4 things that I, Coach Alex at Defining Dad Bod, want you to know about emotional eating. Everybody does it, and we've been doing it all of our lives. But a powerful, disciplined practice can help you regulate, manage, and even express those in a more constructive and positive way for your body. If this topic has been helpful to you and you'd like us to explore it a little bit further, join the Inner Circle and let me know at definingdadbod.com/inner circle. Emotions are a powerful driving force. We're not going to get away from them, and I don't think we should medicate them away. Instead, I hope you'll join me in creating positive, powerful, and constructive ways to manage and experience them fully. And who knows, maybe by watching us, our children and our communities will do the same. This has been Alex Van Houten with Defining Dad Bod. Until next time, guys, kick butt, take names.
1, 2, 3, 4.
The free, practical advice and conversations here remain unbought and unbiased thanks to the support of listeners just like you. If this episode's been helpful to you, please share it with somebody in your life who you know it will benefit. Then, subscribe to the podcast and leave us a raving review to tell others what value Defining Dad Bod has brought to your health and fitness journey. And finally, if you want more Defining Dad Bod, consider joining our online community. We send a lot of free perks and resources your way, and I, Coach Alex, go live every month to talk through our listeners' health and fitness questions to make the practical science of this show applicable to everyday life. Everyone's welcome, and we'd love to have you. For more information about joining the Inner Circle or becoming a supporter of the Defining Dad Bod podcast, go to definingdadbod.com/inner circle. That's definingdadbod.com/inner circle.